What I'm about to share with you is, first of all, I would say it's very personal. My talks that I've given here at the CGDC have been very personal talks, very personal struggles that I have. And so I have gone and researched and thought about and discussed certain topics with other game developers, just myself seeking the Lord, all those things. And so I bring this talk in hopes that this is a benefit to you as well. I can't guarantee that, but that's my hope in bringing this to you. So last year I talked about Christianity interwoven in art, and what that meant, what that looks like, and who can we look to in order to see how it should be done well. And the picture on, I guess it's on your right, that's of Satan, and it's from the cover of John Milton's Paradise Lost. And at the time that I gave that talk last year, I was planning to have read all of the things that I was talking about, but for those who have read Paradise Lost, it's 10,000 lines of poetry. And I just wasn't able to finish it in time for the talk. I think I was about halfway through at the time that I gave the talk. So I did finish it up in July, August, and that book, or poem, fundamentally changed my life. And I can't overstate that. When a Christian produces true art, it fundamentally changes us. Us as participants or viewers of that particular artwork. And so that's what I was struggling with last year, and I got an amazing answer from Paradise Lost. So for today's topic, I was first confronted with this: what does it mean? What does Jesus care what I do in a video game or what I don't do in a video game? The choices that I make in a video game. And so the first place where that came up was working on an article series for Gospel and Gaming. For those that were here last year, Jacob Toman has a organization called Gospel and Gaming, which is an outreach to the church about video games. So that the church can understand what video games are, how to utilize them, whether it's youth ministry or in other forms. And so I naively said, you know what? This whole concept of violence in video games, I think this really needs to be addressed and dealt with, and I haven't seen great resources for that. I'm not saying they don't exist, maybe I never found them, whatever, so I naively sat down and said, okay, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to type out, the perfect answer to violence in video games from a Christian perspective. And 3 hours later, I was like, wow, I'm just scraping the surface of this thing. And so it ended up being an article series. And if you're ever going to do an article series for a Christian site, do it in 3s, 7s, or 12s. So I chose 7. And so it's a 7-part series exploring violence in video games from a multitude of angles. And so that really got me thinking about, what does it matter in Grand Theft Auto when I shoot someone in the head? What does that matter? What does it matter when I choose to kill someone in Dragon Age or other things? And so just wrestling with that led to that. This next game is only available on PlayStation, and it's called Beyond Two Souls, and it's the one that's starring Ellen Page and Willem Dafoe. And in that game, there is, I'll just give you very quickly the backstory. Ellen Page plays Jodie, and Jodie has a special gift, and that is that there is a spirit or spirit creature or something that's unexplained in the game that allows her to communicate with the spirit creature. And that spirit creature is able to go into other rooms and hear conversations and bring that information back to Jodie. It's able to make small changes to the world, like opening a door, flipping a button, those kinds of things. And so I was playing this game not really knowing exactly what this game is about, because again, it's very mysterious. And so there comes this point where Jodie, because she's special, she grew up in a lab. I think it's a DARPA lab. And so all these scientists are, living with her and doing tests on her and all this stuff. And they're all very nice and everything's good and stuff. But then there comes this moment when she's 15 that she's able to go to a birthday party of one of the daughters of one of the workers. And so she's excited that she's able to leave the lab and go and spend this time with people her age that are not testing her about her special abilities and all this stuff. So she's very excited. She gets dressed up. She has her wrap birthday present. She gets dropped off at the house. She goes into the house and she meets a bunch of teenagers she's never met. Do you think they welcomed her? No, because she's like the homeschooler or whatever that doesn't dress the way that they dress, doesn't talk the way they talk, hasn't seen the same TV shows, all this stuff. So those teenagers, through the course of the evening, end up kind of making fun of her and somewhat just being mean to her, to the point where they lock her in a closet. Now, the spirit creature that is connected with Jody, I think his name's Aiden, Aiden is starting to get really angry about what's happening to Jody. And so he breaks her out of the closet, and Jody now has this point where she can turn to the left and exact revenge, Carrie style, on these teenagers and show them who's boss, or walk out the door and forgive. Does it matter what you choose when you're playing that video game? And so when I was playing that, I said to myself, I'm gonna let it go. I'm gonna forgive them. I'm gonna let it roll off my back and forgive these teenagers for behaving the way they did and be Christ-like. You know, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. And I walked out the door. I was on a Facebook feed, Facebook group with other Christian developers and Christian gamers, very thoughtful people. I respect them a lot. And so I saw that he was also playing this, and he posted a picture from this exact scene. And he's like, hell yeah, I'm taking revenge. And I was really offended. I was like, how, as a Christian, can you have chosen to take revenge and kill basically these teens or terrorize them or whatever? And that, it doesn't matter what this other guy did. The question was, why was I so concerned for what he chose in his game and what I chose in my game, and how those lines are, like, and how do I dialogue with him? How do I say to him, you know, I really want to challenge you as a follower of Christ that we both want the best fruit for our lives. I want to challenge you. At what stage do I have that dialogue? Because if we're talking about a game is a game is a game, it doesn't matter. There is no basis for conversation. But that really got me thinking, okay? So, at the surface, when I've mentioned this to people, when I have talked to friends and whatever, this seems like a very simple topic, right? It's a game, so it doesn't matter what happens. But as you start thinking about it, as I have, you find out there's a lot under the surface of this. And so that is what I'm hoping to unpack for you. The next reason that this is an important issue, for me anyway, is because I'm working on Archmage Rises. And Archmage Rises is a game about choices. It's a game where you, as the player, are the character. You, G, are playing the mage. And what you decide to do in that world, whether you decide to befriend someone, you decide to kill someone, you decide to betray someone, that matters. Me as a game designer, I am trying to blur and eliminate that line from you, the player, and the character in the world. Okay? So many times we'll play a third-person shooter, let's say Max Payne 3. I'm playing Max Payne. I'm not playing Thomas Henshaw. Okay? So I, in my game design, want to eliminate that, and I want you to just play this game as you. Now, in this game, I'm having a lot of choices, and in order for those choices to matter, they have to have consequences. The consequences is the most important aspect of it. So, what about marriage? I want the ability for players to be able to have a robust relationship, not surfacey, but a robust relationship with an NPC or multiple NPCs, to the point where maybe you can get married. I think that's a good game design concept that I'm planning to put into this game. Homosexual marriage is now an issue because you can be playing a male character or a female character. And do I allow you, as a Christian, I am against homosexual marriage. I am totally against it. I vote against it. Didn't matter. Canada passed a law that you can marry homosexually in the country. But I'm totally against that. Now, as a game designer, do I still allow it in my game? Do I give the player a choice that I personally disagree with, but do I allow them to do that? And further, does Jesus care? Does he have something to say about what I as designer put into my game as choices? Are there simply choices that should just be right out? And maybe that for you is a different choice, but it really came to the forefront for me around this whole marriage issue. Okay? So, does this kind of make any sense when I'm talking about this? Yeah, okay, I see some nods. So, the magic circle, some people may not be familiar with that term. It's an industry term in game design. And all games, whether it's a sport or whether it's in video games, it doesn't matter, even in board games. Okay? So, the concept is that you have these boundaries of whatever the game happens to be. You have some kind of boundary. Okay? In the real world, I kick a ball into a net. That's what actually happens. Okay? Everybody witnesses what happens. But within the boundaries of the game, within the understanding of the game, I scored a goal. There is only the concept of scoring a goal within our minds in the game. Okay? If you're not playing the game, if you're just driving by, you're like, hey, look at that guy, he kicked the ball into a net. Who cares? It doesn't matter. But for all the people watching the game, it's the most important thing in the world, maybe, right? Especially if you're Brazil or Germany. So, what happens inside the magic circle is very important, and that's why this is called the magic circle and the cross. A great example of this is chess. If you don't know the rules of chess and you walk up to the board and you'll look at them, it's like, wow, neat little things, right? And the placement of them doesn't matter. You pick it up, you put it down. Maybe it's a quarter on a certain square. Maybe it's halfway between two squares. It doesn't matter. In the game, when you say, let's play a game of chess, it matters a whole lot what square the queen is on. Is it dark? Is it white? Right? It really matters. Somebody jostles the board, it could really upset everybody that's involved in looking at this game. Okay? So that's the difference between real world and inside the magic circle. Now, how does the mainstream answer this? What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happens in the game stays in the game. That is the industry standard answer. Okay? Now, the industry is not totally wrong and evil and that sort of thing. Okay? They do believe that exposure matters. Okay? So this is why we have a rating system that says, okay, there's some kind of effect, we're not exactly sure what it is, or people get offended when you show pornography to 12-year-olds, so we're going to have some kind of rating system, and we're going to at least limit exposure to ideas, concepts, images, that kind of stuff. Okay? But the industry is very clear, and this is from game designers, this is from raters, and whatever, the industry is very clear that actions in a video game do not matter. Okay? So, what you see played out is this straddling the line between what's offensive and what's going to sell. Okay, so there will be things that are not in video games, not because they disagree with the actions being taken, but because they disagree, or because they're concerned about who's going to be offended, right? If you offend too much of, say, Middle America, then it's not going to sell enough copies, whatever, so we're going to take that feature out. And so that's where you see the so-called morality within the video game industry working. And so I'm going to show you a really weird example that probably none of you are very familiar with, and that's the point of being a speaker, is to bring new information to people, right? So we're going to talk about Final Fight. Final Fight, for the old school gamers here, is a fantastic game made by Capcom, and I played it in the arcade and munched lots of my quarters. And so for anybody who played Final Fight, and I played it the most on N64, so in Final Fight, you play as these guys, and you beat up other guys, and it's kind of like Double Dragon and many of the other kind of fighting games, the Streets of Rage and all this other stuff. Those are all very similar games, okay? Now, the world is very inconsistent with the message about what is okay and what is not okay within video games, right? I just told you what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So, Nintendo, when they made the N64 version of it, they replaced Roxy and Poison with Sid and Billy, because hitting a woman is wrong. Okay? So they changed the graphic. The play is identical, but they changed the graphic. Why would Nintendo do this? G. I'm going to stop picking on G. Why would Nintendo do that? It's because of that offensive, right? They don't want to lose sales. They don't want the big hoopla and all that stuff. Rockstar kind of embraces some of the hoopla, but definitely at that time in 1992, 1994, okay, it was suicide in order to have that kind of hoopla around your game. Okay. Now, Grand Theft Auto. This is a forum post on the official Grand Theft Auto forums, and in case you can't read it, the poster says, "I don't see any children, infants on the streets. I would like to shoot some of them, but I can't find none." Wow. Now think about that. There's an issue that somebody is posting about this and asking for help to try and find children to shoot in the video game. If you read the rest of the thread, you'll see people saying, yeah, Rockstar chose well here, we shouldn't have that, that's not cool, blah, 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 blah. Why? Why? It's the logical conclusion of anything that happens in a game is just in a game. It doesn't matter the actions you take in a game. Okay? So even Rockstar, while flaunting a lot of things, has still put certain limits onto what they're going to do. So I find that very interesting. In tabletop gaming, I think it's the easiest to see this for anybody who's had the opportunity to play a tabletop role-playing game. Tabletop role-playing is very different from computer role-playing, and definitely MMO role-playing. The reason is that you have a game master or a DM, dungeon master, that is setting out the basic structure to a story, but it's the players that really control the story. For anybody who's been a frustrated GM, you know it's the players controlling the story, and not you, okay? And so, I was running a game of D&D 4th edition, because I like 4th edition, and that makes me, I don't know, repugnant to most geeks, but I like 4th edition. So, I was playing with a 17-year-old who's not a believer, but it doesn't really matter, and I was playing with some other believers. And we were in the inn, and I think as I was giving kind of what was going on in the inn, I said something like, the barmaid comes, gives you your food, kind of winks at you, and leaves. Well, the 17-year-old was like, really? Wow, I want to talk to her. And I'm like, okay, fine, we'll do a charisma check. You have to get a 15 plus or whatever. He rolls it, he fails. And then he didn't say this, okay, doesn't matter. He didn't say this, but what if he said, you know what? I want to try and rape her. Is a game just a game just a game? Is my responsibility at that point to say, that's a strength 15 check, roll it out, and there you go? Or does it matter, these concepts, these ideas, these desires within the players and what we're giving them within the game? Does that matter? How do Christians answer this? And I didn't do an exhaustive study because I think that's, well, it's outside my budget to do that. So how do Christians generally answer this? I've gone to different talks. I've been in St. Louis, I've been in New York City, in Toronto. I talk to people all over the world through Facebook and other things and stuff. And this is the general answer that I get from the Christian community, okay? We define ourselves by what we won't do. We won't, and I'm not talking about all Christians, I'm saying generally Christians are against having magic, warlocks, summoning demons, violence of whatever type, sex, homosexuality, okay? So if I'm a Christian, I'm playing a video game, I won't partake in that. Or very conservative Christians that really think about this, they'll end up there, okay? So what does that mean? That means I will only play Paragon Shepherd. I refuse to play Renegade Shepherd. And first of all, I have to applaud, people are living out their faith, right? I'm not here to judge anybody and say, well, that's silly, you shouldn't play just Paragon Shepherd, you can play Renegade. I'm not in any position to say that. What I think is great is the person said, you know what, my faith matters in my entertainment too, and I am only going to play Paragon Shepherd. Awesome. On what basis can we discuss that choice? I'm just going to play Pallies. Doesn't matter what the game system is, I'm going to be the righteous warrior that brings down holy justice on whoever is out there, okay? For myself, when I play The Sims, I don't know why, but I play The Sims in a very realistic way. I create Virtual Thomas. I create Virtual Catherine. They both have separate households. Eventually, Thomas gets a pretty good job. He has enough money. He starts wooing Virtual Catherine. Eventually, Virtual Catherine accepts his proposal. They get married, and they have a virtual child. I played every version of The Sims that exact way. So, you know, when 4 comes out, I already know what I'm going to do. Okay? But The Sims is a very open game. In The Sims, I could have Virtual Thomas commit adultery on Virtual Catherine. What does it mean to choose that? There's a life of crime option in The Sims. What does it mean to choose that? What does it mean to not choose that? Okay? This is not just about bad choices, this is about good choices. And do angels do a dance when I choose not to live a life of crime in The Sims? Okay? In BioShock Infinite, awesome game, totally impacted me, probably because I hadn't played the first BioShock, so like everything about it was brand new to me. I see a lot of effort going into video games by Christians to offer players the Christian thing to do. If you're doing that, I really think you need an answer for what does it matter choosing the Christian thing to do. So in BioShock Infinite, there is a point where you can have a baptism. And when you go to that baptism, the pastor reaches out to you and says, son, will you reject the devil, the flesh, and the sin in your life? And you have an option to choose it yes, full on in, yes, I totally do want to reject those things and get baptized, or the more reluctant, like, yeah, let's see how this plays out kind of yes. I mean, it's a but thou must kind of situation in the game for story purposes, but does the choice of embracing the baptism matter? What if you had an option in a video game to accept Christ? Does it matter? What if that acceptance of Christ gave you a power-up? Does it now no longer matter? Okay? This is the kind of stuff I spend my life thinking about. Okay? So, like I said, I've spent about 6 months on this, and I felt inadequate to give you a great answer on this. And so I reached out to some people who are here and some people who are not, that are other Christian game developers. And so through the 7 of us, I have put this presentation together. And so I hope it is helpful and meaningful for you. And like I said, I'm more than happy to dialogue about this stuff. That's the only reason I flew here from Toronto, was to be able to talk with you guys face to face about these kinds of issues, because I think these are important soul issues. And when I, as a Christian game developer, am struggling with these things, I'm looking for a resource. I'm like, where do I go? What group of people can I talk with in order to help me make good and wise decisions? And that's you people. That's the CGDC. That's what it is for me. And so that's why I'm here. So the ultimate challenge, the ultimate question was given to me by someone in my church who was very upset that I sold magic cards in my gaming store. And he said I was living in sin and I should be removed from being an elder. And the logical conclusion, therefore, is if I'm unrepentant and living in sin, I should actually be removed from the church. He didn't care about that part so much. He didn't like the fact that I was an elder and selling magic cards. And so when I dialogued with him about it, this was his question. Why would I pretend at that which is forbidden? Now, I got to tell you, that's a really good question. And I wrestled with that one for more than 6 months. So that was a very challenging question, and I hope to give you somewhat of an answer. So what kind of an answer are we looking for? I am not looking for the 11th commandment here, because I don't think it exists. And so the thing about rules is they remove relationship. There's a lot of fuzziness in Christianity. If you love rules, go to Islam. There's no fuzziness. Christianity, God says, this is what I want, but there's lots of stuff he didn't say what he wanted, as far as what kind of school my children go to, or like there's just all these things in life, right? How to worship. How many songs before the sermon? How long should prayer be? None of that is answered, because God doesn't want to give us rules. Nothing to replace relationship with him. So he for sure gives us truth and reveals himself, and we know things. We know he's immutable. We know he is good. We know he is loving. Okay? Not fuzzy on those things. What you do in a video game, I don't think there's the kind of answer that you're just like, yep, boom, there it is, that's the verse, we all live by it, we're done. Okay? This is something to be played out in your life and in mine. So, when it comes to an answer, I think that there's a framework for thought and reflection and guidance as opposed to a rule. And so that is what I hope to bring you in this. But before I can give that to you, we need to dive a little deeper below the surface. Okay? Let's have some water. T.S. Eliot. It is just the literature that we read for amusement or purely for pleasure that may have the greatest influence upon us. Okay, video games. Great quote from Thomas Edison, there's no substitute for hard work. Well, I'm here to tell you about video games. Why are video games so enjoyable? I have been making educational games for the last 2 years. I have dove into game theory, psychology, learning principles, the impact of learning through video games, and all that stuff. And one thing I can confidently tell you is the reason that you and I enjoy video games is because we get the same high of accomplishing something in a video game as accomplishing something in the real world. So, let's say you have a big pile of bricks that are just laying there in a big pile, and you need a wall, and you spend all afternoon moving those bricks, lining them up, making a pile. At the end of the day, you're having your unsweetened iced tea because you live in the South, and you're just like, wow, I did good work, I feel good, right? I feel good about how I spent my day and spent my hours and all that kind of stuff. That feeling is what video games give you faster and harder than any other form of entertainment. Okay? That is why video games are addictive, but anything that's enjoyable is addictive. Sex is addictive. Food is addictive. Flattery is addictive. So anything that's enjoyable, why is it enjoyable? Because it gives you that feeling, that satisfaction of having done hard work, okay, or done something meaningful. So, are all games the same? Okay? He's Mario, he's big, and he's stomping on things. There isn't really much more that goes into that story. Okay? Contrast that with Mass Effect 3. Totally different. So, even when we talk about video games, not all video games are the same. There's the equivalent of just pop music in video games. It's just like, yeah, it's just fun, it's just whatever. Right? It's Mario jumping and bouncing and whatever. There's no existential dilemma. There is no message in the Mario, unless G wants to tell us what it is. So there's, sorry G. Not all games. Not all games explore ideas in meaning and existence. Okay? So I want to be clear about that. But some of them do. Retention and transference. The reason games are very powerful for education, and the reason that the new crop of educational institutes, you could call them schools, but they're kind of different. You know, the Bill and Gates and Miranda Foundation are sponsoring these smart schools and all this stuff. Why? Because you have self-guided progression, and retention is the ability to hold and recall information. I have a 2-year-old. She sits on my lap. We read Jack and the Giant Beanstalk. I point at the little bird and I say, "What is that?" And she says, "Bird." She could remember that just from the last time that she sat in my lap and we read that book. But when I turn the page and that bird is larger in a different position, and I say, "What is that?" and she says, "Bird," that's retention. Okay? That's the ability to know and remember. It's also transference. Transference is the ability to apply one set of information to another situation. Okay? So, for instance, if I was to go punch somebody in the nose and they punch me back, okay, I go up to a different person and I think about punching them in the nose, and I remember, wait a minute, the last time that happened, they punched me back and I didn't like that and whatever. I've never punched this person in the nose before. You could say, I have no way of knowing what's going to happen. Transference is taking that knowledge from the previous situation and applying it to this situation. Okay? So video games have the, studies show the highest degree of retention and transference out of all mediums. Mediums of standing here talking at you, mediums of online learning, mediums of movies. The highest degree of retention and transference is in video games. Video games are powerful. I was in Florence at St. Mary's Basilica. I went for a walking tour through it. I looked at the ceilings, it was really cool. I looked at the outside, it was really cool. I moved on. I played Assassin's Creed 2. In Assassin's Creed 2, you climb that outside. You go inside, and you have to jump across chandeliers and all this stuff. I saw more of St. Mary's Basilica in Florence in the video game. I experienced it more, the height of those ceilings. All the intricacies of the sculpture work, I experienced it more profoundly in Assassin's Creed than standing there looking at it. Now you might say that's really sad, or wow, video games are a really powerful medium. When I think of simulators, I think of my Tandy 1000 running a 086 processor at 4 megahertz, 4.77, and running Microsoft Flight Simulator. And I think it still looks good. But I know for a lot of you that this might be more like your experience of a simulator today. Okay? Simulators give us the feeling of I did it. I did it. I landed that plane at PDX, right? I avoided the obstacles. I made it through those rain showers, the turbulence, and whatever. I did it. And the goal of a simulator is to make it as close to real life as possible, right? Like, that's what they're always working towards. And so, as graphics get better and AI and all this stuff makes it more and more realistic. Fast forward to GT Academy. If you're not familiar with this, Gran Turismo is created by a guy who is a race car driver. Okay? The guy who is the designer of the series really does race cars, and he's very good. He wanted to make a driving simulator that brought the track to the TV. He really wanted to do that. And he did it so well that people, they put on this contest, Sony put on a contest for the top drivers in Gran Turismo to fly out and race against real race drivers. Not like the top level, you know, NASCAR, whatever stuff, but, you know, there's like the minor leagues of racing, right? So they flew these guys out, and they put them in cars, I think it was like for a week in GT Academy, and, you know, taught them things about the physical car they may not have known, and they raced, and they won. They beat the actual racers that have come up from the go-karts when they're only this tall. And they come up from the go-karts and everything, and they beat them. Wow. Real-world skills coming through a video game. Now I want to talk to you about wish fulfillment. I'm bringing a lot of things on the table before we're going to wrap this up into one, hopefully, cohesive, conclusion. Okay? Wish fulfillment is very important in video game design and video game marketing. So, I'm going to present you with 2 game ideas and ask you which one would you rather I build and have you play. The first one is Milkman. Super realistic, set in the 60s, where you can play the route of Milkman. And you have to make the deliveries, you have to pick up the milk, you have to sell it to everybody, you have to get those empties, you have to move them all back and put them in the truck, you have to drive the truck, and you have to avoid bicyclers and people delivering the newspaper and dogs that might chase you, and all that stuff, okay? So that is Milkman 2014. Or Ninja Game.
I want to try Milkman.
Yeah.
Sushi World.
I played Ninja. I played
So,
Ninja.
if you're at GDC, PAX, whatever, you're walking along, you see those 2 booths. You only have time to visit one.
Milkman.
Chances are pretty good you're going to Milkman. That's right.
Well, it's what you need.
It might be like Goat Simulator, you know?
Yes.
You said realistic.
Okay, I think you all get the point here. So,
That's something people would think about.
that's right.
Nashville, I've never been.
Hey, Milkman Simulator, you heard it here first.
You have to deliver the milk in the night.
Whichever has less microtransactions.
Good one.
Those bicyclists are hard to avoid, man.
Yeah. Okay. So that's wish fulfillment. Many people will want to play as a ninja. Many people do not want to play as the Milkman. And why is that? Because we want to experience what it's like to be heroic. We want to experience what it's like. It doesn't really matter even if it's heroism, right? I played Farming Simulator. I loved Farming Simulator for a very short period of time because I wanted to know what it was like to be like a farmer. I grew up in a big city. I have no idea, right? So I thought it was cool, like jumping your tractor and have all these attachments on the front and the back. I didn't know that. And driving through the field and mowing things and all the different pieces of equipment you have to have. There's a lot of boys' toys involved with being a farmer. Like, that was cool. I got to, in a very small way, in a very surfacey way, I got to feel what it was like to be a farmer.
But the Milkman was a hero back then.
Yeah. Okay? Is it perfect? No. But I got to feel like I was a farmer. Video games offer a lot of violent fantasy experiences, and I'll just whip through them. Postal 2 is about going postal. Carmageddon, from the IGN review. The Carmageddon series, there's nothing nice about it, at least in warm fuzzy terms. The original was a violently messy game that gave life to the joke about scoring points for killing pedestrians. It was this total disdain for life that got it banned in several countries, as well as giving it instant credibility with video gamers. We really are a sick bunch. Interesting language coming from IGN. That probably praised Grand Theft Auto 5. I didn't bother checking, but very interesting. Okay.
Do the GTA 5.
Lollipop pizza.
Lollipop Chainsaw. Saints Row 4 with the anal probe gun. And finally, Grand Theft Auto 5. These are all offering violent fantasy experiences. These are all offering wish fulfillment. Wish fulfillment of a certain kind. Now, the most killing in any video game ever made is DEF CON, made by a British little independent studio. And it's on this website. It says the world's first genocide Wow. Now, they're pretty tongue-in-cheek about that. That's pretty funny. But if you've had the opportunity to play DEF CON, it has music that is very eerie and just it's very subtle. It's very in the background. And when you see a certain nation, doesn't matter who they are, they pop up with their subs, and you see a launch and it's flying towards you, and you hit the button, it's just like send them all, send all the nukes from all the subs and all the silos and all the everything and stuff, and you watch the little explosions. There isn't even a boom sound. It's just little things that puffs that pop up, and it says 6.2 million dead. Another puff. 4.3 million dead. Okay? Very interesting experiential game. It's really something. Okay? There are many experience games. I would argue all games give you some kind of experience. Okay? There's the platforming experience of Mario. That's just like, you know, what it's like to jump around and whatever and stuff. But then you have something like Gone Home. And in Gone Home, I didn't know what it was really about. I heard people raving about it and whatever, and then I went to Steam and it was 20 bucks. I'm like, full price. I've never paid full price on Steam. But I really wanted to play it, so I did. I bought it at the full 20 bucks. And there is, you know, funny videos of people saying it's not really a game. Why? Because there's no shooting. And so in Gone Home, you play a teenage girl who has just returned home from a long backpacking trip in Europe, and your family's not home. And that's the mystery. You just explore the house to find out, where is everybody? How come nobody was home to greet you? And the experience of that game is, I wonder what's in that drawer. I wonder what is written there. And you start to uncover these people's lives, and it's a really well done, well written game. I don't agree with everything in it, but it's an extremely well made game around experience. Another really great experience game is Papers, Please. Okay? This is a little bit like the Milkman thing. I never wanted to be a customs agent. That was not a wish of mine. But after playing Papers, Please, I was like, that was really fun to experience what it's like to be a customs agent in kind of a Soviet-style, communist sort of country. It puts you in there, and again, like the farming simulator, is it perfect? No. Is it exact? No. Is it shallow? Yes. But for a few moments, you can feel what it's like to play a customs agent, look at all the documents and stuff. And now, when I go through airport security, I have a different view on life from having played this game. And isn't that interesting? This next one is an experience game too. Has anybody heard of this game?
No.
Yeah. This is a real game that is being made by a woman, and she wants to explore what suicide feels like in a video game. And it's an Oculus Rift game. Because they want to make it as close as possible to what that experience might be like. So this is what she says, and I think it's worth hearing in its entirety. Why suicide? It's a complicated subject. I'm not suicidal, though I do think about it a lot. Death, or more specifically, ceasing to exist, always has heavily on my mind. I'm terrified of the idea of ceasing to be, but I also have extreme bouts of depression and anxiety in which I feel a desire to be able to kill myself. Similarly, I have had many friends who see suicide as an actual option, not in some kind of dramatic cry for attention way, but a genuinely cold and rational option if things get too overwhelming physically or mentally. So suicide has weighed heavily on my mind the past few months. That, along with the Oculus Rift coming into existence, and this idea that video games provide an emotional, immersive experience that's hard to replicate with other creative mediums. The idea of a first-person suicide game is incredibly intriguing to me. Flower is a game about beauty. The designer was driving his car through the concrete jungle of Japan, and he looked out the window and he saw this little flower that was growing, and it made him, he had like an emotional experience. He was just like, there can still be beauty in this world, even though we have built all this stuff and maybe ruined it and everything. And has anybody had a chance to play Flower?
I've seen YouTube videos.
Yeah, just a couple people. Flower is pretty amazing. I mean, I looked at it and I'm like, what is that? But you fire it up, and when you start moving the controller around, it really is something. And you know what? For me, I am not a nature lover. Okay? I went out on this canoeing trip with a friend of mine. I'll never forget it. It was early in the morning, 6 o'clock. Sun was just rising over these beautiful hills in the background, and there was this fog kind of just coming off of the thing, and the lake was like glass. Okay? And so we are paddling to go to our next kind of portage point, whatever. And he was like, look at this. This is God's nature, just amazing. And I'm like, yep, let's go. Okay? So I am not moved by nature, okay? I am moved by G.K. Chesterton and things C.S. Lewis has written. Those blow my mind in the same manner that my friend's mind was just in awe of God in that nature moment. Flower reached me, okay? It's a powerful medium. It reached me and helped me to see God's beauty in nature. Except it wasn't really God's nature. It was a man's idea of God's nature. But it still gave that to me. Okay? So it gave me a new appreciation for it. And what's great about Flower is I saw through the eyes of the designer what he wanted me to see. That's a well-made game. The artist's heart is to invite you into an experience. Okay? That's why an artist is making whatever it is they're making. Now, you have your choice as to whether you accept that invitation and experience what that artist wants you to experience, or to reject it. Okay? So I went and saw the statue of David, also in Florence, made by Michelangelo. And I walked down the row, and there's all these, I don't know what you call them, like, you know how we all have unfinished games? Okay, well, Michelangelo has unfinished sculptures. And it's just like a big hunk of rock with a few ribs. A big hunk of rock with one hand coming out. And it's just, he's just testing and prototyping and playing with things and stuff. Okay, so the way you walk up to the statue of David is there's two and two and two and two and then the statue. And I walked up to it and I looked at this amazing thing that's been so photographed and talked about and whatever and stuff. I'm like, wow, the hands are too big. Okay, I rejected the artist's invitation in that moment, right? But other people beside me were just, wow, can you feel it? Can you feel what Michelangelo was seeing and what he was thinking 400 or whatever years ago, right? So you can accept or reject that artist's invitation. Art reveals something about you. Okay? It reflects back at you. So maybe there's something that bothers you about a piece of work, right? That suicide game. Maybe there's something about that bothers you. Why? And you need to think about that and reflect on that. And that's what true art does. Okay? So games as art explore ideas. And I did originally have Ryan's game in here of That Dragon Cancer. But I knew you were going to be here and you're probably going to talk about it, and I needed to find some time. So I cut that slide, but that was right in here, Ryan, with experience games. And like I told you, I'm a big fan of what you're doing there. So games are art to explore ideas. Are all ideas worth exploring? This is a game called Default Dan. Anybody heard of Default Dan? It's an indie title. It's not out yet. It's currently under development. In Default Dan, everything is the opposite. Coins kill you. Mushrooms kill you. Spikes bounce you. Holes make you fall from the sky. So when you're Mario and you fall down the hole, you pop out of the sky. Giant flowers, that's how you take a teleport to another section, another flower spits you out. So what's interesting about this game is he has taken everything that we are accustomed to, all of the player expectations that we bring to the game, and he's flipped them. And when you start playing that game, 3 minutes in, you're like, wow, have I ever been pre-programmed to expect certain things in a game? Okay? So that is a very interesting game, and I think we're pursuing more. So it's important the expectations we're bringing to a game. Okay, so there are games that I would say are morality and experience simulators. And my first experience with that was Mass Effect 1, when I encountered the, I think it's Rachni or Rachni, okay, queen. And you have the choice as the player to kill the queen and eliminate that species from the universe, or allow her to live. It doesn't matter beyond that. And what I mean by that is you don't get a power-up from killing her, you don't get a power-up from not killing her. The game deck isn't stacked that way. It gave me the choice of genocide of this particular creature. Okay? And that's when I first encountered it. And I was like, I kind of really want to kill them off because they were annoying to fight all the way here. But I ultimately chose to let the queen live. And I didn't know what that meant for the ending of the game or for the sequel. Like, I don't know where that was going. It just felt important at that moment. And that was an example of what I call a morality experience simulator. A more recent one is in The Wolf Among Us. Now, The Wolf Among Us, I played it through. It has a lot of nastiness in it. It has a lot of nasty violence, and sex, and nudity, and language, and all those things. What I found really compelling and interesting about this game, versus many other games, or versus all other games that I have played, is in The Wolf Among Us, the whole game leads up to, I think, one decision. After 8 hours of play, one decision. I'm playing the character Bigby, who is the big bad wolf. I have the choice of doing what my superiors want me to do, or taking matters into my own hands. I think that's what the whole game comes down to. And the Telltale, the way that they do the game, it makes it seem like it really matters. To me, it really matters which one I choose. What about when you're playing a game like SimCity, and you're like, I need to really up the land values for this thing, I'm not going to get the tallest skyscraper or whatever, get my tax revenue up. I'm going to bulldoze some poor section and put in a park in order to boost my rich people. Does it matter what I do in a video game? Does it matter what choices I build for the player in my video game? What about civilization? You can make an alliance with someone. They can trust you. You can trust them. You can betray that trust. Or you can be honorable. Does it matter? That makes me wonder, when I play these games, it holds up a mirror, and I think it says, what kind of person am I when I'm choosing these things? I think there's an answer in this statement from Fear. If anybody's played the Sierra game Fear, I forget the company who makes it, but it's published by Sierra. And Fear has a nail gun. And so when you shoot the nail gun, it pins the person to the wall, depending how close they are when you kill them or whatever and stuff. So it pins the body to the wall. So that created this whole other thing where people were trying to get funny and interesting poses with the nail gun, right? Pinning things to the ceiling, pinning things to different objects, pinning things to other objects, and all this stuff. Okay? So you start scrolling down this forum thread, and there's all these kind of gruesome pictures of these weird bodies and all these misaligned shapes and everything, not the way we're used to seeing the human body. And finally, somebody posts on there and says, this is terrible, what are you people doing? You're caught up in this whole kind of macabre, evil thing. Like, this isn't right, people. And somebody answered them and said, it's just a game. And it's not real. And they responded with, yeah, but your enjoyment is. There's great wisdom in that answer. Porn manga. a lot of groups within America, Canada, wherever, will be against pornography because of how it treats women. Okay? Because women have been victimized. Because women were asked to do things they didn't really want to do and all this other kind of stuff. So you'll get women's groups and other groups that will fight pornography. What happens when there's no women involved? What happens when there is no so-called victim? Okay? Manga that's made pornographic has already done that. They've removed the woman aspect. There's no longer a person anymore. Now they're just drawing things and putting them on the screen and syncing up sound to it. It's is it really lust? Is it really lust now? And this leads us towards the answer. Where do moral choices happen? Are they in the world or are they in the heart? Epistemology is the science or the philosophy of how do we know what we know? How do I know that you're all here and I'm standing here? How do I know that? Because this could be the best version of the Matrix yet made, and I'm in a vat, and this is what's pumping through to me, right? How do I know? And so the answer there is decisions and moral choices are not made in the world, they're made in here. And if they're made in here, now it matters it's in a video game, right? So it sounds like Jesus said something about hate and killing in here. Didn't matter what actually happened with the killing out there, right? So it's not in the game, it's in you. So let's zero this in. Wanting to see how a game plays out is one thing, okay? So you're Big B and you're in the Wolf Among Us and you're trying to decide, am I going to do what I'm supposed to do or am I going to take matters in my own hands? You may be making that choice because you just want to see what the developers did, okay? Or you played it like me and you're really in that moment. You're just like, yeah, what am I going to choose? What is the right course of action here? I mean right in the moral sense of right. Like, what is the right choice that I am comfortable with making in this moment and walking away from the game with? Wanting to be stimulated in certain ways is, I think, the core of the issue about what it is, about the choices I make in a video game. Okay? So it's, and when you get to that point, then it's like, oh, what Jesus said about lust is it's not about what you do with the woman, it's about what you want to do inside, right? It starts in here. That is the core issue. So I'm going to unpack that a bit more for you. But really the core answer here is Jesus cares what you do in a video game if you do. Now that sounds really simplistic. So let me unpack that. It's about being true to conscience, right? And so, for the people that I talked about at the beginning that are like, I will only play Paragon Shepherd, if you don't play Paragon Shepherd, that's an issue for you, right? You've drawn your line in the sand, and now you've crossed that. I will help hold you accountable to your line that you've drawn in the sand. Okay? I'm not going to come down on you and say, come on, you have Christian freedom, it's just a game, blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to argue with you at that. If that's where you've drawn your line, I'm going to support you in that. Because it's a matter of conscience, and that's important. And so this is similar to what Paul talks about meat to idols. And so this is why I was talking before about the artist's invitation. See, when I was playing Beyond Two Souls, I fully accepted David Cage's invitation. I was playing Jody and what was going on in there. The other guy who's like, I'm taking revenge, take that everybody, he didn't. He didn't see it as something that matters. He was just like, I want to see how that plays out, right? With the taking revenge way. So we're not even playing the same game in the same manner. And that's important to note when you go to have discussion about that, when we go to hold each other accountable, to make sure that we are following Christ in our choices. A second example of that is in first-person shooters. I love Battlefield. That's my Call of Duty, so to speak. And so this idea of Jesus cares if you do. If I go to play Battlefield because I'm frustrated at my job and I don't feel like anybody appreciates me and I just want to act violently, and I go and I fire it up and I grab that controller and I nail those people in the head, and I feel good about it because now I have power and now I feel like I'm giving the world what it deserves. I think Jesus cares a lot about that. If I go to play Battlefield because I love playing the speed of it, the ability to hit the button at the exact right moment in time to get that sniper shot from across the whole level, I'm playing that in a whole different way. Right? One of those, I'm not there to kill. The kill animation is the result of me hitting the button at the exact moment in time. Anybody play Dragon's Lair on the old laser discs and stuff? Yeah, Dragon's Lair, there you go, right? Games haven't changed since Dragon's Lair, I'm sorry to tell you. You are hitting the right button at the right exact time to see those next few frames. That's what Call of Duty is. That's what pretty much everything else is. Except maybe your game, Ryan. Right? So it depends on how you're playing it. Grand Theft Auto 5 has strip clubs. I have never been to a strip club. I've done plenty of other terrible things, but that's one that I haven't done. So, I don't want to go to a strip club. Well, I kind of, what do you mean? I don't want to cross that line. Okay? I don't want to cross that line. Now, Grand Theft Auto 5 comes out, and it has strip clubs. And I'm pretty sure that the missions require you to go to a strip club. But even if it doesn't matter. In Grand Theft Auto 5, you can go to a strip club, and you can pay a woman to give you a lap dance. And they've motion captured, and they photograph people, and have great textures, and it's as close as you can get to going to a strip club. Okay? Now, if I'm going to Grand Theft Auto, I'm like, yeah, my wife won't know. I can play downstairs, she's sleeping, and I can finally go to a strip club virtually. I think Jesus cares a lot about that. If I'm deconstructing Grand Theft Auto 5 to understand how far did they go with this thing, whether it's to write an article or an opinion piece or something like that, I'm not saying that's right or that's wrong. I'm saying that's very different from, hey, finally, I get to go to the strip club virtually anyway. Does this make sense? Yeah? Okay, so that's the Jesus cares if I care. But there's a couple other things that we need to talk about, and one of them is the walk-away effect. Okay? So, what am I bringing back to the real world? The images are fake, but your enjoyment is real. It's kind of like what the children brought back from Narnia, right? They went through the wardrobe, they were in Narnia, they were kings and queens, all this amazing stuff happened, they matured, they had these amazing experiences, they learned a lot about themselves and life and everything, and they stepped back through the portal back to the real world. They brought those experiences with them, right? Video games are very much like visiting Narnia, and we can bring back those experiences with us, whether we want to or not. You can mentally scar yourself, I know I have, with the choices that you make in video games. That's the walk-away effect. It's kind of like music that repeats in your head. You have a choice over what music you're going to listen to. Thirdly, we are protectors of our own imagination. It's a little bit long, but it's a really, really good quote. Imagination can be powerful assistance in discernment because through it, we can try on various scenarios and test out possibilities before we settle on one path. It matters, though, how we nourish the religious imagination. Social activist Andrew Beath relates the following story. During a discussion about nonviolence in the face of passionate emotions, a Native American friend told me a story from her tradition. A grandfather told his granddaughter, "I feel as if I have two wolves fighting in my heart. One is vengeful, angry, and violent. The other is loving, kind, and compassionate." The girl asked him, "Grandfather, which wolf will win the fight in your heart?" He answered, "The one I decide to feed." And finally, I think we're called to follow God as creator. So going back to my initial question about marriage in my game, God has allowed a lot of choices in this world He is not impressed with, that do not follow His will. I'm going to allow homosexual marriage in my game. And some of you might be really upset about that, and you'll have words with me afterwards, and I welcome that. I want to have that dialogue. But I'm telling you that this is where I have landed on struggling this through, is that there are definitely going to be choices in my game that I will not include. But this is one that I have chosen to allow. We have to be really careful in these situations, and that's why I look to the Christian game developer community to keep me accountable. And then, so Michelangelo, great painter, sculptor, and architect, actually was a pretty awesome guy. So he painted a lot of figures. Then he started to paint nude figures. And his teacher, kind of sensei type person, came up to him and said, "Michelangelo, what are you doing? Why are you painting these people naked?" He says, "I paint them to see them as God sees them." His teacher says, "But Michael, you're not God." That I use as a guide as I work on my game. This is the world of Valen, and you see that it's empty because you're going to write your story in this world that I've created for you. And you're going to meet a lot of different characters, and you're going to choose what you do to and with and for those characters. And because it's not 3D, and I don't have to do voiceover and all this stuff, it's a lot of text, and I know I'm not going to get great sales because there's so much text in the game and whatever, but it opens up lots of possibilities. If you look back at the kind of games we were able to play in the 90s, they were far more free than a Grand Theft Auto 5 really is. As you go and make your games, be sensitive to causing others to stumble. So your choices in what you put in your game, the choices you allow, the images that you include, can have people stumble or soar. And that's something that I am taking part as I go through the design process on Archmage. I'm really impressed with the game Brothers. I wasn't too thrilled in the first kind of, I don't know, half hour or whatever of it and stuff, but then I played it all the way through and it was totally worth it. That's an amazing experience simulator game. And finally, Rockstar makes games with only a very narrow band of experience. We can make the rest. There's a lot of experiences in life besides being a jerk and being promiscuous and shooting people in the face and all that sort of stuff. What if you had a game where the longer you were with the same woman, you got more reward? Because that is real life. Grand Theft Auto 5 has you like fill your health bar or something when you take a hooker home or a stripper home. The game is designed with a certain outlook on life that it doesn't matter who you're spending your time with. And I'm like, wow, what if you went the other way? John Wesley had a great saying. He says, "Get on fire for God, and all the world will come and watch you burn."